The title of this book, The Spiritual Man, the author of the book is Watchman Nee. We are now in chapter 4. The Great Part 2, chapter 4. Title of chapter 4, The Boasting of the Flesh. Chapter 4, The Boasting of the Flesh, subpart 3. Chapter 4, The Boasting of the Flesh, subpart 3. Self-confidence and self-reliance, as we have said, are the notable traits of the good work of the flesh. It is impossible for the flesh to learn upon God. It is too impatient to tolerate any delay. So long as it deems itself strong, it will never depend upon God. Even in a time of desperation, the flesh continues to shame and to search for a loath's fall. It never has the sense of interdependency. This alone can be a test whereby the believer may know whether or not a work is of the flesh. Whatever does not issue from waiting upon God, from depending upon the Holy Spirit, is unquestionably of the flesh. Whatever one decides according to his pleasure in lieu of seeking the will of God emanated from the flesh. Whenever a heart of utter trust is lacking, there is the labor of the flesh. Now, the things done may not be evil or improper. They in fact may be good and godly, such as reading the Bible, praying, worshiping, preaching. But if they are not undertaken in a spirit of complete reliance upon the Holy Spirit, then the flesh is the source of all. The whole creation is willing to do anything, even to submit to God, if only it is permitted to live and to be active. However good the deeds of the flesh may appear to be, whether veil or sin, always loom large on the horizon. The flesh never acknowledges its wickedness, nor admit its uselessness. Even should it become a laughing stock, the flesh remains unshaken in the belief in its ability. Having begun with the spirit, are you now ending with the flesh? This uncovered a great truth. One may begin well in the spirit, but not continue well therein. Our experience bears out the fact of the relative ease with which a thing may begin in the spirit but end up in the flesh. Often a newly apprehended truth is imparted by the Holy Spirit. After a while, however, this truth has turned into a boasting of the flesh. The Jews in the early days committed just such an error. How frequently in the matter of obeying the Lord, of denying oneself afresh, of receiving power to save soul, one genuinely may rely upon the Holy Spirit at the outset, yet no long afterward the same person change God's grace into his own glory, treating what is of God as his possession. The same principle holds true in our conduct. Through the working of the Holy Spirit at the beginning, there occurs a mighty transformation in one's life, whereby he loves what he previously hated and hate what he loved before. Gradually, thought self begins to creep inwards. The person increasingly interprets this change to be of his making and into his own admiration, or he grow careless and gradually push on by self-trust rather than by dependence upon the Holy Spirit. Thousands of matter they are in the experience of believer which begin well in the spirit but terminate unfortunately by the flesh. Why it is that many of God's dear children eagerly seek a holy, consecrated walk and most earnestly desire the more abundant life, but nevertheless fail. Often when listening to message, conversing with people, reading spiritual book, or praying privately, the Lord make known to them how perfectly possible it is to have a life of fullness in the Lord. They are made to sense the simplicity and sweetness of such a life, and they see no obstacle in the way to their securing it. Indeed, they experience a blessing with power and glory which they have never before known. Oh, how good it is, but alas, how soon it all vanish. Why? How? It is because their faith is imperfect. Their faith is imperfect, or their consecration not absolute. Surely their faith and consecration have been utterly toward the Lord. Then why such a failure? Why is the reason for losing the experience, and how can it be restored? The answer is simple and definite and defined. They are trusting in the flesh and trying to make perfect by the flesh what was begun in the spirit. They are substituting self for the spirit, self-desire to lead the way while hoping that the Holy Spirit will come alongside and assist. The position and work of the Spirit have been replaced by that of the flesh. Absent is that complete reliance upon the Spirit leading to accomplishment. Absent also is a necessary waiting upon the Lord, attempting to follow Him without denying the self is the root of all failure. The sins which follow. Should a believer be so self-confident that he dare to complete the task of the Holy Spirit in the energy of the flesh? He will not come into full spiritual maturity. He will instead drive until the sins he previously had overcome return to him again in power. Do not be surprised by what is said here. It is a spiritual truism that wherever or whenever the flesh is serving God, there and then the power of sin is strengthened. Why did the proud Pharisees become slaves to sin? Was it not because they were too self-righteous and served God too zealously? Why did the apostle shade the Galatians? Why did they manifest the deed of the flesh? Was it not because they sought to establish their own righteousness by a work and to perfect by the flesh the work which the Holy Spirit had begun? The hazard for young believer is to stop short of the putting to death of the power of the flesh in doing good by only knowing what the cross does for the sinful side of the flesh. In so doing, they retreat again into the sins of the flesh. The greatest blunder Christians overcome it upon experiencing victory over sin lie in not using the way of victory to sustain it. Instead, they try to perpetuate victory by their work and determination. It may perhaps succeed for a while. Before long, thought they shall find themselves sliding back into their former sins, which may differ in form but not in essence. They then either slump into despair by concluding that constant and persistent triumph is impossible to achieve, or they try to camouflage their sins without honestly confessing that they have sinned. Now what is it that causes such failure? Just as the flesh gave you strength to do righteously, so it also gave you the power to sin. Whether good act or evil, all are but the expression of the same flesh. If the flesh is not furnished opportunity to sin, it is willing to do good, and if once the opportunity to perform good is provided, the flesh will soon revert to sin. Here Satan deceives God's children. If believer will habitually maintain the attitude of the flesh being crucified, Satan could have no chance. For the flesh is Satan's workshop. If the flesh in whole, not just in part, is truly under the power of the death of the Lord, Satan will be totally disemployed. He is consequently willing to allow the sinful part of our flesh to be offered into death if he may only deceive us into retaining the good part. Satan is quite aware that should the good side remain intact, the life of the flesh will continue to be kept alive. He still has a base from which to operate to recover that side which he has lost. He knew very well that the flesh could win and regain its victory in the realm of sin if the flesh succeeded in squeezing the Holy Spirit out in the matter of serving God. This explains why many Christians fall back into the service of sin after they have been set free. Should the Spirit not actually be in complete and continuous control in the matter of worship, it will be unable to maintain dominion in daily life. If I have not yet entirely denied myself before God, I cannot deny myself before men, and therefore I cannot overcome my hatred, temper, and selfishness. These two are inseparable. This explains why many Christians fall back into the service of sin after they have been set free. Should the Spirit not actually be in complete and continuous control in their matter of worship, it will be unable to maintain dominion in daily life. If I have not yet entirely denied myself before God, I cannot deny myself before men, and therefore I cannot overcome my hatred, temper, and selfishness. These two are inseparable. Through ignorance of this truth, the believer at Galatia fell into beating and devouring one another. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 15. They attempted to perfect by the flesh what had been begun by the Holy Spirit. for they desire to make a good showing in the flesh, in order that they might glory, in order that they might glory in their flesh. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 12 to 13.